Thank you to Refraction for hosting us so physically as offices here as RiskLens and for the opportunity to present to all of you. We will be leading Paige Pilarski and myself, called Nick as well, so I follow the great example there. And we'll be presenting a subject that many people thought was elusive in the industry. And it's about quantifying cybersecurity risk. And we'll guide you through that, challenge and the ways that the industry has been trying to tackle it and what kind of possibility are being enabled. And this is a journey that very large companies have been undertaking in the last years. You know, companies like Walmart, companies like Honeywell, Bank of America, PNC Bank, American Express. Many companies are tackling these challenges right now and been partnering with us. And so today we'll tell you a little bit about that, hopefully in non-salesy, non-marketing, non-obscure terms, but if something deserves clarification or you cannot, wait to ask a question, raise your hand and let's go ahead, okay? We can make it as interactive as we want. So, the biggest question I want to ask you is, how do you think that people make decisions in cybersecurity today?
They consult with their CTO or CIO, other C-suite members, as a CEO you would, and just get their assessment of what tools they need to implement?
Yeah, but what is the driver of that? What tools you need to buy, What is the driver?
Is it retroactively after they've had a security breach?
What I'm asking is, like, if you were, in a commercial company and you're in charge of security, how do you make those decisions, Based on what? I think, yes, probably breaches are a big indicator and possible fear of future breaches. Any other ideas?
Well, I know that the government's working on guidelines and a resource. And
yes.
I go, is there currently a resource for different levels of companies, different types of industries? Is there a guideline system in place?
Yeah, so I think what all these, it's a very good point. So the way people make decisions today, it's mostly driven by past experience and making sure that in the future we don't repeat those bad experiences. And in cybersecurity, it's about bad experiences about breaches or attacks where people try to steal resources that they can make profit of. They can steal money, they can steal credit card information, social security number, they can market it out there. They can keep you hostage, take your data and keep it hostage until you pay some ransom. So there's many ways, and usually it's fear of future similar events that drive their action, okay? And regulations are a way to try to help make decisions in cybersecurity. They will drive a minimum layer of security that is necessary to minimize the risk of future cyber attacks, okay? But the main reason why companies are spending money on cybersecurity today is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When I ask people, how did you convince your CFO to invest in this technology? He says fear. And they say proudly, like, I've done a very good job. I got all the money, all the people I wanted, because scared the heck out of them. And if they don't give them money, they will take the responsibility of the next attack. Okay? Wow. Do you know any other department that works that way? Not many. Okay? And the problem is that it goes in cycles. There's cycles where you get as much money as you want, but then the board a couple of years later is like, we give you all that money, what did you do for me? Okay, it goes in cycles, and then you need to go back and justify why you did certain engagement. So that's what we're going to talk about. How do you justify cybersecurity beyond using fear as a tool, okay? And how big do you think this problem is? How pervasive is it?
Huge. It is.
Huh?
It's huge.
Huge. What? Everybody gets attacked. I mean, we are gonna say we are a small company. We get attacked. Okay. We people pretending, to be a friend while they're a competitor, or trying to study our identity. And the question is no longer if you're going to be attacked, it's more like when you're going to be attacked, okay? I'm right now investigating something at home because my computer is working when it's supposed to be idle. There's activity there driven by some external IP. It's like, oh my God, this is not good. Somebody's using my machine for some other purpose, and I need to get to the bottom of it, okay? So what is the biggest challenge? And let me tell you the story of a friend of ours. It's called Jack Jones. He's, by the way, full disclosure, one of our co-founders. He was the Chief Information Security Officer of Nationwide Insurance 15 years ago. And he was in a business setting. And the board asked him, so where do we stand? And he said, oh, the number of threats we're having, here's the trend line, the number of vulnerabilities, the good news is going down, it's a lot. He was speaking in very technical terms. And at some point, the board said, time out. We have a simple question to ask for you. How much risk do we have? And he sheepishly said lots. And because he understood that they were asking a question that deserved an answer in dollars and cents. And I told him, if you give you these millions of dollars, by how much would you reduce risk? Very fair business question. And he again, in a very embarrassed way, said, some, we cannot eliminate risk totally, but we're gonna have less. And he felt really bad about that answer. And he left that meeting scratching his head. It's like, how is it that we're the only department in the company that cannot justify, in economical terms, the impact of our work? And the common answer in these last few years has been, cybersecurity is too complicated. It is too difficult. Just trust us. Okay? Which is a unique position to be, because how many people in companies can get away with that? Not many. Okay? Yes?
I have a question, because I was at a meeting talking about insurance and people insuring their data, and the insurance company was sort of pushing back saying we can't insure data. And so how do you qualify a loss when you can't even insure that loss because they're still not, it's so new, it's such a new field.
So that's what the presentation is about. So we hopefully will
And that's what's
answer.
fascinating about
Yes,
it. Yeah.
and absolutely. And so that's a very good question. If you see here, we have even within companies, that famous question, that the board asked how much risk we have was then followed by questions like that one. It's like, should we even consider cyber insurance? And which comes back to how much risk do we have, and what type of risk should we insure against, okay? And basically, there's a department called Enterprise Risk Management is asking the CISO, should we buy cyber insurance, okay? And other questions come up. It's like, the CIO wants to know, you guys in security, you have all these tools. Antiviruses, anti-denial of service attacks, and anti-ransomware, anti-phishing is like, but are we spending money on the right things? Which are the things that move the needle the most? And then other questions like, are we spending too much or too little? You keep asking and asking, and you're telling us if you don't do that, we're gonna face a big problem. So the questions pile up. And so there's a big communication divide between the business and security that is treated like these are people whose job is to plug holes, and they talk past one another, okay? We all agree with the problem. So I haven't answered your question yet, but we agree that that's a problem, okay? The questions you've been exposed to is part of the problem. And what are companies doing about it today? So today when I ask, we're talking about corporations, Fortune 1, Fortune 3, Fortune 8, Fortune 15, Fortune 20, companies we work with. And then even smaller companies, like how do you assess risk today? And at best, you get, we follow a government regulation called NIST CSF. They have like 90 categories against which we can assess our maturity, and we rate ourselves on a scale 1 to 5. So you go back to the board and say, we have 50 risks, high risks, and the rating is a 3, or actually a rating in red is a 4, okay? And we want to use our budget and maybe buy cyber insurance to get it to a 2 or 1. Sounds intriguing, but how much will you reduce risk? Still not done, okay? Or how much risk is this situation? Oh, we are 3.5. What do you make of it? How many resources should you apply to that? You have no idea, okay? So while what we're doing today is very good in directionally telling you whether you have high risk or low risk, you still cannot make cost-effective decisions. Should we invest? Should we spend that much money on these risks or not? You have no idea. By the way, that's the status of the industry today, okay? So if the risk is a 3.5, should you buy insurance? You can't make those decisions, okay? If I need, there's an amazing product on advanced malware, costs $500,000. Should I buy it? How much should I spend on anti-phishing training? You know those emails that people pretend to be your bank and get your login information? Should you do training? Yeah. Should you spend a lot of it? No idea. Okay? That's the problem we're facing. Okay? That's the status of companies with some have hundreds of millions in budget, and that's where they are. Okay? So, Paige, so what are the problems we have to solve here in this journey?
So one of the first major problems that we see in cybersecurity in general is the problem of terminology. So I want to take a poll real quick and raise your hands if anyone, if given the opportunity, would take the chance to go on a space tourism trip. Okay, very adventurous. All right, now keep your hands raised if you were still going to go on that trip, if all the scientists and the people who planned the spacecraft couldn't agree on foundational terms like velocity, mass, weight. Okay, so we see how prevalent it is and how important it is to have foundational terminology. That's kind of where we're at with cybersecurity and information security right now. So one of the big things is I remember like one of the key examples is I was at a cyber risk conference in New York, and I was listening to a panel. There were 4 chief information security officers from major organizations, and they began the panel by asking them, how do you define cyber risk? And there were 4 different answers from these major, CISOs of major organizations. And if it comes down to a question like that, you're comparing apples to oranges, and you can't really measure your risk at all if that's the state of the state of the industry. So one of the biggest things for RiskLens has been a breakthrough in defining risk in a really consistent way. And so the way that we look at risk is the number of times a threat attacks an asset that might be protected by a certain number of controls and then has a material impact to the business. So this is something that can be applied to any type of risk, and more specifically we talk about it in information security and cyber risk. What we've done is developed a standard model called Factor Analysis of Information Risk. And this standard model takes that simple definition and then breaks it down into different categories. And what this allows you to do is look at risk in a way where you're comparing apples to apples versus apples to oranges. Because these specific terms, loss of frequency, loss magnitude, they can all be measured in numbers and percentages or dollars and cents. So you have a consistent way to look at risk overall.
All right, just to give an example when there is a problem, or how pervasive it is. Every company we meet, when we look at, we ask them, what is your risk of top risks? They show us their list. And you know what, 70, 80% of the items are not risks. Like we were at a Fortune 1 company, and the number one thing is like, what is the risk? The cloud. The cloud? Why is that a risk? And why doesn't it qualify as a risk? Because you haven't defined an impact, you haven't defined an asset, you're talking about a concern in general. A risk is a risk when you have a threat affecting an asset and then a material impact. So if the problem was rephrased in like, we at this Fortune 1 company are concerned about cyber criminals hijacking some data as we move applications to the cloud, and then results in money in stolen, that's a risk, okay? So people don't even talk about risk in very foundational terms where they talk about an impact. They talk about concerns, they talk about weaknesses, they talk about vulnerabilities, but in most cases it's not risk. And so if you do that, you mislead management and you cannot make decisions. Make sense? It's basic as that.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what Nick said, when we do look and analyze the amount, like a risk register that has, hundreds of risks in it, like you can, if you define it by the factor analysis and information risk model, and you look at risk in that lens, you can, typically by orders of magnitude, decrease the amount of risks that are in that risk register because they've been double counting or triple counting things by counting them, by not consistently defining risk. So that's a big breakthrough in terms of terminology. And then a second problem that we often hear from prospects, so why can't you analyze your risk better? We don't have enough data. Cyber risk is so new. There's always, cyber attackers are always coming up with new ways. We don't have enough historical data. There's no way we can really put numbers to analyzing risk. But they're looking at the problem in a way of, I need to come up with a single number that is precisely right to help you understand how much risk you have. And that's the wrong way of looking at the problem because there are ways to get around a limited amount of data. And one of those ways is by utilizing ranges. So if I can't give you a specific number on the number of, if I can't present to the board on this is the exact number of times you're going to see an attack in this year, I can provide him with a range of historical data points from what I've seen before. So this is a snapshot from one of the questions that's asked in our application. And what you see here is you'll see enter a minimum and a maximum, and this is for an event frequency. So utilizing ranges allows you to give a useful degree of precision to decision makers. And then these, the ranges are applied, you use mathematical techniques called Monte Carlo simulations, which are embedded in the product. So using these ranges, you're able to give a level of confidence in presenting accurate information that's so much better than just saying, ooh, this is my best guess, or this is a high, this is a red. And this adds a level of sophistication, and it helps you to back up even if you have cases where there aren't a lot of data. So one of the other key major problems we see is that you're not able to quantify the impact to the business. And the problem has been that historically, for the past number of years, we've been asking cybersecurity analysts to estimate what is the financial impact to the business of a cyber breach. That's not really in their job description. That's not something they're supposed to know. So the way we've come around and looked at the way we've solved this problem is by going to subject matter experts who are in areas of the business like finance or legal or heads of business units. They're the ones who know what has happened in the past when we've been breached. And so you go to those subject matter experts and ask them for ranges and estimates of what they've seen in cases in the past. And these are logged into something in our tools called loss tables. So you are able to utilize the data from the subject matter experts and define it in areas like fines and judgments. What are the losses you're likely to see from fines and judgments in case of a breach, or reputation, or lost customers, etc. And suddenly it's so much easier for a cyber risk analyst to select the loss table utilizing loss data from his own from his own business that's specific to his business, and he's not making approximations and guesstimates throughout the analysis. It also adds a level of consistency if you're using the same loss tables, and then you can revisit these when on a yearly basis or something with these subject matter experts to make sure that the quality of the data loss is still there. And solving these three major problems has allowed us to really revolutionize the way that you're analyzing cyber risk in the space, and it goes beyond red, yellow, green to a fiscal, monetized assessment of risk. Yeah. And I think now Nick will be showing a little bit of the reporting and how this helps us to elevate to a more business-aligned and cost-effective decision making.
Thank you, Paige. So what we talked about is the biggest problem we have in cybersecurity is you gotta have a model to break down risk so we can quantify it. Second is there was this myth there was not enough data, and we haven't found one company that had once presented with the evidence has come to that conclusion. And third, we have seen that we've been asking oftentimes questions to the wrong people. We've been asking technical people business questions, while we need to ask technical people technical events questions and their business counterparts about the impact and getting it all together. And the result is that you can now present cybersecurity risk in the same way that risk is being represented in other domains. If you go to big banks, they make estimates on, can I say, market risk or credit risk. And risk is always presented as the distribution of probabilities. Life is uncertain. The only thing that's certain is death, okay? But life is uncertain. And so, and in this case, this is a representation of a risk associated with data loss for a company. And if this company were to be subject of an attack that stole all of its data, they could lose a maximum of $1.3 billion, okay? That's a big number. And some companies thought about risk in the past, all or nothing, okay? If something bad happens, they steal everything, okay. And so they think they need to invest and protect their company according to this possible loss. But if you look at probabilities, where does 1.3 million here? It's somewhere here, you cannot even see it. This probability of a complete data loss in a year to happen is very small. So would it be very wise to make an investment decision based on maximum? Not really. You should probably look at average, somewhere between the 10 and 90th percentile, and say, we should probably make investment decisions based on where it's most likely that we're going to be, can I say, incur losses. And when you look at that, for this bank, it was like, what? This is our potential average yearly loss? It's much less than we thought. Why? Because you're looking at it in probabilistic terms, okay? And for customers that we interact with, it's the first time they see numbers and say, wow, now I can put my head around. Our budget is $19 million, makes sense, it seems like proportionate, but then you see how much more granular we can get if you get more breakdown. And now we get to, I'm going to answer your question. By using that risk methodology that, Paige talked about, you can break down also risk in various categories. Risk doesn't happen in one form. Risk can happen in forms like, there can be attackers that bring the system down, okay? A hacktivist doesn't like oil company, they want to bring the systems of the oil company down to stop their production, okay? That results in productivity loss. People cannot get their jobs done, people cannot transact with the company, you're going to have some costs there. Other costs, direct, we call them primary losses, could be replacement of assets, A machine has been fried, you need to replace the machine, okay? There could be response costs. You need to bring in some expensive consultant to get you up and running again. Those are some costs associated with some breaches. And then, in the industry, what we've seen is that, you know what? These primary impacts of breaches are not the major issues that companies face. The fallout of attacks usually are much more important in terms of cost for companies. And usually it's not intuitive, okay? And this was a bank, for them, the biggest impact from a cybersecurity attack was secondary response, which is basically, we got compromised, credit cards number was stolen, we need to pay people credit monitoring. I got 3 offers of credit monitoring 2 years ago from JP Morgan Chase, from Anthem because I was an Anthem customer, and Target, okay? Because my wife shopped there. So 3 companies paid me money, so this is this bar, money taken from this bar to pay millions of people like me to make sure that their account was not breached. Plus reimbursement costs, and then reputation loss, which is, reputation loss could be Target. My wife, for 6 months, she didn't shop at Target anymore. She was afraid that, if they were compromised once, it would happen again. 6 months later, she couldn't resist. There was an item she really wanted, the only Target actually went back, okay? But there was a slowdown that cost Target money. So if you can see, if you can break down cybersecurity loss or risk in these categories, now you can start making some intelligent decision, like, should I buy insurance? If somebody says, do I need to buy insurance? And now you can ask us, like, what type of cyber insurance do you need to buy? Do you need to buy insurance for replacing your assets, or you need insurance for, for credit monitoring, expenses related to secondary response. Now you can tell me.
Well, when I was one of the people on Delta, and people originally thought it was a hack, but it was basically infrastructure problems. Of course, the CIO would know about the infrastructure and then also the breaches. But when you talk about secondary response, it's costing them a fortune to keep their reputation, to compensate everybody for being delayed 2 days. So I think that the fear of God is into everybody now, seeing what can happen if your data is not only compromised, but if it just goes away.
Absolutely.
So I think, but how do you price the value of that data, and who gets the insurance money? If you're insuring a company,
Yeah.
how does it go to the, that's what I'm saying, when you calculate risk,
Yeah.
how do you involve the people, or do you just involve the corporation, and then they're responsible?
Well, today, I'm gonna say we work with corporations, okay, mostly. Even though, this subject would be applicable to, many more people. First, you have 2 questions there. The first one, how do you calculate things like reputation loss, okay? Depends on the company. For some company, reputation loss is a factor of my stock price will go down. My cost of getting a loan from a company, my credit cost will go down because I'm more risky at a company, so the bank may give me a worse interest rate. Another form of reputation loss, we may see a slowdown in the short term of new customer acquisition. We may have churn in our customers because some customer says, I don't want to deal with through this channel anymore, and it could be that, or it could be in the case the other day we were at a coffee company that has many shops around that comes from Seattle. You can figure out what it was, and for them reputation loss is a problem because they don't want people to feel insecure if they are on their computers sipping a cup of coffee in their shop. Okay, so depending on the company, we can price down possible scenarios that if you are breached, what is a possible fallout of that? Okay, the fallout can be scoped. It can be scoped, but it depends on the company. Second is, if you were to buy insurance, now you can have a discussion with an insurance company, because insurance company, what they do, they say, we don't know how to quantify risk. Okay, some of them looking at our product, but many don't have it. And so we can give you a blanket $50,000 coverage. $50,000 doesn't do me anything, I'm talking millions, okay? Some companies say $100 million coverage. Okay, it's already better, but based on what? We will only cover you for final judgments, for productivity loss, but not these 2 things, exclusion, because this is fuzzy for us. You don't do me any good. So some of our customers did not buy cyber insurance because the insurance company did not have products to cover them for the major categories of loss. They only went with things that are more well known, but don't represent much risk. Okay? And second is when you need to, then you can price it. If they have a product that can cover you, you can tell them the magnitude represents for you. It's like I need coverage for this whole amount. If you give me 50K, it doesn't do me any good. Okay? So we have, so you can see how this is done. So to today, the scandal in the industry a little bit is that cyber insurance industry is booming. A lot of companies say, I want to insure myself against breaches, and the few products you have are not specialty products. They are they are forfeits, like you can buy 50K coverage, 100K coverage, $50 million coverage, but they have a lot of exclusions. They almost never apply. It's almost never driven by a picture like this, where it suits your needs. Okay? So right now we have a hype in the industry going with people buying cyber insurance, but it's not grounded on sound underwriting. We went to see the #1 insurance company in the world in cyber insurance and asked them, how do you underwrite your customers? Well, we'll send this big questionnaires of 1 to 5, so yes or no's. And how do you determine the amount? We go to Garen. Who's Garen? He's our specialist. I go to see Garen and say, Garen, how much do you decide as a company? I have a feel for this. I mean, like, so 5 years from now, when there's a claim, who's going to remember your reasoning process? We're making money, we're selling the stuff. That's what the status of the industry is. Scary, okay?
How long do you think it will take for actuarial models to evolve to a point where the insurance companies can offer the insurance and it's priced appropriately for the level of insurance the companies need? Because what you're focused on right now is the corporate need.
Yes.
but for this to fully work, the insurance company needs to have actuarial models in
Yes.
place that accurately reflect
Yes.
the business environment. And this is a conversation that's been going on for a very long time, and they haven't cracked it yet.
So I think with our experience is that you can solve this problem one company at a time today, because you can come up with, you've seen before, this notion of loss tables that we can compile. We, a small company, can compile it with large companies, and insurance companies shouldn't have difficulty doing that. What you're merely referring to is having those kind of actuarial tables per industry, per size, etc. We believe that if, by doing enough, of those analyses, an industry will be able to come up with that data. And we are right now working with insurance companies to get it to them.
Yeah.
So we are months and maybe a couple of years away from being able to provide that level of accuracy that it was not available before. Okay. So insurance companies have the need; they don't know how to do it. Okay. So other breakdowns are basically, wow, if you can break down and understand what are the threat communities that are threatening us the most, the biggest contributors to potential loss. In this case, cybercriminal, the privileged insider, it's great intelligence, because in this case for this bank, nation state was not a factor, it wasn't big enough. But if privileged insiders is a significant piece of it, then you suddenly think about, maybe I should pay attention to who I'm hiring, making sure I'm not hiring criminals. How are we doing in terms of background checks, okay? And let's have another look. That's the kind of decision you can make. And second, you can see where risk is concentrated. What most companies do when they buy security products, because they don't think risk, they don't think in financial terms, they apply security products across the board. I'm gonna put an antivirus on everything. I'm gonna put another tool on everything. Whether it matters or not, I have no clue. Just in case, let me apply to everything. It's like spreading, butter on a piece of toast evenly. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should put more resources where you have more loss exposure and less where it matters less. Okay? That kind of decisions cannot be enabled unless you have a financial view, a financial translation from cybersecurity into financial risk.
And then, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Because I learned that most hacks happen because people, and I'm over 50, but people over 50 allow for phishing to happen. So when you look at that in the training, but then I was told it's age discrimination if you train your employees that are over 50 about not accepting phishing. So then you have to do anti-phishing
Yes.
training for everybody.
Yeah.
So when you put that in as a risk, just the employee not aware of a certain thing to
Yes.
do,
Yeah.
where does that fall in that chart?
That's, by the way, very good. By the way, very timely, because you can. I can use this chart now to answer. Because those are the cases we had with a customer. They were about to buy anti-phishing training, and the CISO said, "We're gonna train everybody not to click on the stupid emails of people pretending to be your bank, to be your grandmother, to be your accountant, etc." And we ran the numbers. How much risk is there in your company without anti-phishing training? And they come up with a distribution like this. Okay, forget the numbers underneath. With a distribution similar, okay? So we're gonna have an average of risk like this. There's a spread, etc. If we apply training and reduce the number of people that click on stupid email from 5% to 1%, let's see how much risk reduction we get. You know what the answer was? Any guesses?
0. Okay.
Why?
To 6 to 1%.
Exactly. So, there's good news. They cannot blame you, because even if you reduce the number of people click on those stupid emails from 5% to 1% in a company, it doesn't matter, because if only few people click in, those guys are in your system anyway. So, does it mean that we should not do anti-phishing training? No, it's a good thing, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of junk in your system. But it will not make you much more secure, so do it, but don't pay a lot of money. Pay as least you can on anti-phishing training, because it doesn't move the needle.
That's good, thank you.
So, I don't know if it makes you feel better, but it does not move the needle. So you see, you can start thinking about on the relative efficacy on products. We have a lot of things, kind of situation like this, where customers say, I'm about to spend $500,000 or $1 million on an expensive security product. Am I spending too much? Well, let's calculate. Let's see before and after and see if the average risk reduction is meaningful, We're a company, a big company in Wall Street that says, I'm gonna buy $500,000 of advanced malware. We want to see before and after. The before and after picture was 80 million. It was a no-brainer, they invested in it. $80 million risk reduction, $500,000 investment, no-brainer, okay? Anti-phishing training, shoot, I was hoping it was the silver bullet, it's not, okay? Let's not spend too much money on that. You see?
I guess I'm having a hard time with that, and not because your argument is right. If everything is monolithic, that is, if your entire organization is interconnected, then any path in does affect it. But most organizations are diverse. They have enclaves. They have systems in different places, and a large corporation has many sites. And there are walls between those to do that. And
Yes.
the degree to which an anti-phishing, I work for HHS, okay,
Yeah.
so Health and Human Services, gigantic department, anti-phishing makes a huge amount of sense. It would make sense in many corporate environments also,
Yeah.
for the same reason.
Yeah.
You've got different types of data
Yeah.
access. It's how many endpoints get compromised.
Absolutely, you have a very good point. I'm gonna say how to look at the big picture there, okay? When you look at risk, you talked about number of events, but number of events, event frequency is half the equation. The other equation is the loss mapping. Give an example. Anti-phishing training doesn't move the needle on the event frequency, okay? Advanced malware solutions, they have an impact on event frequency, okay? But another control, like segmenting your databases, you said in some cases, you segment your database. That's a form of control. Instead of having all your data in one place, spreading it out, if one point gets compromised, one small database, you lose less if you take the entire pod, correct? What does it affect here? It affects the magnitude, the impact side, you see? So when you calculate risk across the board, you're gonna see the effect on the frequency side, or the effect on the impact side, or both, okay? So we'll look at it holistically, okay? I used some simple examples, but sometimes it's shades of gray, a little bit of impact here, a little bit of impact there, and then you see what the overall impact is. Make sense? So that's what's underlying it. So going back to our reports, so that's basically what allows you then to do ROI analysis. I mean, there's ROI analysis. In this case, it was a bank. They're having a $10 million budget. They're able to show a few quarters later that they were able to reduce their overall loss exposure in average by almost 100 million. That's a good indicator. So you're telling the board now, I have not eliminated risk. We may still have breaches in the future, but our money was spent to reduce the probability of risk and the amount of big losses to this level. And now it's you're talking in economical terms, okay? Because what we thought many years ago was that if you buy the security product, you're going to be totally secure. Those days are over. You're not going to be totally secure. You need to decide how much risk you're willing to undertake. And these are methodologies that allow you to say, is this okay, or should we reduce it further? Okay? What is loss exposure willing to undertake? And sometimes you're able to show a big reduction in average risk over time. There's a report that shows loss exposure or risk reduction over time, or sometimes risk increases because it's a new threat. Or a company may acquire another company that doesn't have security practices. And you want to be able to go to the board, it's like, we are able to reduce risk from 300 million down to 175, it's creeping up. Is that okay, Mr. Board? Or should I tell you what it will take to get the curve down again? So long story short, to tell you in this presentation that if you hear people saying we're making cybersecurity investment based on fear, uncertainty and doubt, there are better ways now, okay? If you hear that, well, cybersecurity is too complicated, we let the techies make those decisions, it may not be good enough, okay? If you see arguments among people saying, well, we should invest in this tool versus that other tool because philosophically we have this preference, we don't have to settle on arm wrestling or fighting it over. We can just run the numbers and see which remedy reduces risk the most. And then have factual discussion and say if one remedy based on a certain investment reduces risk by 71 million, the other one by 10 million, or doesn't move the needle, the numbers will speak by themselves. Okay? So that concludes our short presentation in terms of showing the art of the possible, how company like ours and a new standard risk model are changing the way we think about cybersecurity from the business perspective. So this is not another hole we plug in the in the wall, in terms of stopping attackers. This is a way to make economical and cost-effective decisions on where you should put your money and for what reason, for what effect.
So recently I had to fill out one such form that you're mentioning about from the insurer, like 20-30 questions, like is your data encrypted at rest, you exposing any PII, all that kind of stuff, right? So I guess these charts are very powerful to get your risk levels and so on. How much of the process really automated, like all the way taking from your system perspective to all the way kind of coming up with these nice insights behind it?
Yes. So most of the questions, so basically the way, now we're getting specific to the methodology. The solution we have engineered works a little bit like TurboTax. I don't know if you're familiar with the TurboTax to do your tax declaration. Yeah. So in TurboTax, you would scope yourself and say, I'm married, I own my house, I have this much stock, I make this much money, and then the tool will spit out X number of questions that you will answer, and upon answering which you will have your tax declaration done. We work the same way. You would scope yourself, and you would say, your risk analysis, and say, what are the assets I want to protect? What are the threat communities I worry about? What are the loss tables that are relevant to these scenarios? Okay? And then the tool will spit out between 8 and 35 questions, no more, no less, that you will answer in a way that looks very similar to what Paige showed you earlier. The questions are in a format that look very similar to this, where you would have a question in plain English. In this case, is a question on event frequency related to Windows servers. The third community is privileged insider, the administrator. In this case, not even an attack, it's a mistake. They make a change in the system, and they bring the system down. How many times has this happened in your company? And in here you provide the estimate. So the answer is, how automated is it? Today it's workshop-based. We go to the subject matter experts, and we ask them to provide estimates for the inputs. We don't take it straight out of security problems. The future, we're building on, there's a work group by some companies, including Cisco, Bank of America, and others. They want to work with us to force the security companies to provide output in a format that's compliant to ingestion by tool like ours. Okay? But today, it's based on workshops that it's like 30 questions that look like this. Make sense?
So is this a tool where you go and sit across the table with the customer and the business guys and techies, and you sort of discuss this and get this out, or is this remotely being done by company? How is exactly the product working?
So the solution we provide is a SaaS platform. Okay. So you subscribe to a service. But the way it works is that you sit down with the business probably 1 day, 2 days a year to populate those actuarial tables we talked about, those loss tables. When these things happen, what is the cost of downtime for an hour for this application? 2 hours, 3 hours. Are you subject to any fines and judgments, to any regulation? Yes. How much, when you're out of compliance, how much is the fine? So we
is
sit
that
down.
the CISO?
Now there's usually legal, finance, application owners.
Who is the main guy who's at the other end?
Okay, so this is one side of the equation, once a year.
Okay.
But the other answers are coming from the cybersecurity team.
Okay.
Frequency, bad things happen, the scenarios, bad things happening, it comes under the system. Yes. CISO or the Chief Information Risk Officer, depending on who they have in the organization. Or Technology Risk Officer. Right?
You are not actually coordinating that.
Okay, so we teach customers how to do that.
Okay.
There's a big percentage of customers want us to hold their hand for the first analysis because they haven't done it before.
Yeah.
They said, until now we're checking boxes, checklists, and doing 1 to 5 color codes, heat maps.
So you would provide that advisory if
Yes.
required?
Yes. Okay. Because it's change of mentality. Before it's about checking boxes. I think in authentication, our process are 3 out of a scale of 5. That's what we're doing. And now, we need to estimate number of events, How many of your system compliant? 90% are compliant. How many people would this attack affect? 10,000 people? That's the kind of question you need to plug in here, okay? And then you get the result.
Do you talk to a company about the actual solution, such as increase your headcount of your security staff or insurance, the specifics? Or do you just give them the data and then they internally decide what to do with that data and suggestions?
They usually decide. We don't make decisions for them, but they have the intelligence to make those decisions, okay? And oftentimes it's a collaboration because sometimes improvements in controls to reduce risk are a question mark. And sometimes it's not always buying a product. It can be a process improvement. Give an example. The other day, there was a company that said, an industrial company where the auditors said, you know, we are not patching our system enough. What does it mean patching? If some systems have some known vulnerabilities, like it's a Windows application, and it's open to this, can I say, the possible attack, there's one known out there. If you don't fix it, high likelihood of being attacked, can I say, being breached. Our policy says you shall patch every 3 months. You're doing it every 9 months. Their window, that extra window of 6 months, it's a huge opportunity for attackers to exploit it. And they will say, IT, you shall fix it. And IT said, it's too much work. And we don't believe it's gonna move the needle. They say, let's see what RiskLens says. They ran the numbers, it was a huge number. You know what the IT said? Let's fix the problem, okay?
So you're looking at the products that they use already that they have in place. Like here, an example is I've been going to these cybersecurity conferences. They're like every other week in DC, and they're working on like legislation. And then finally the State Department showed up, and then the guy was complaining that they're no longer getting service for their Windows 2003 by Microsoft. So when you look at people using outdated systems, their increase skyrockets.
Yes, absolutely.
And so
we start at the current state.
People.
Current state, but hiring the right people is part of it as well.
Is that part of what you do?
It's part of the assessment as well.
Okay.
Because, can I say, if you hire better people, you're going to have an effect on systems being compliant.
Correct.
Can I say, procedures being followed, and then will have an effect on the impact or the event frequency. So you can measure, if I hire a certain class of people, they know what they're doing, and my system is going to be more compliant by X%, what is the effect on risk? You can make those kind of decisions, okay? You see, it gives you a whole scale of visibility, scope of visibility you didn't have before.
And that's the brilliance of the private sector, is that you have that flexibility to look at it.
Well, but now the public sector is noticing, because public sector, the kind of reporting they do is, in the public sector, since you, okay, I'm gonna go on the internet here right now, and I'm gonna show you something on the web, and then we'll adjourn in a couple minutes. And if I go, okay, so in the public sector, they used a framework called NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It's mandatory now for most organizations. And you have 90 questions, basically telling you how well are you performing across a certain number of activities, cybersecurity activities. And you can rank yourself on certain scales, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, etc. This is taken out of reporting from a real company. They say current maturity on this aspect is a 2, and I promise you, boss, I'll get it to a 4 if you give me that money. That's the state of the art in government today. State of the art. Many people are not even doing target; they're just telling you where they are. Okay. Imagine 90 of those. How do you know that a 1, 2 to a 4 versus a 3 or 4, which one reduces risk the most, this or this? You can't tell. Imagine you have 90 of those. You can't prioritize. But imagine you can now stack, rank, risk associated with certain activity and say which are the ones that have the biggest risk, give me the biggest risk reduction. You want to focus here. You want to just guess and just do it based on people's rankings, mental prioritization, okay? That's the journey that the government needs to take, to go from rates to economical decisions. Okay, yes?
Does your product also help with scenario development?
Yes. Scoping is the #1 problem, by the way.
Yeah.
People think data is the problem.
Sure.
It's not data, it's scoping. Because how to slice and dice your environment and how to imagine or list your scenarios is the most important thing. Like for this big Fortune company, when they said, we told the board the cloud is the biggest problem. Really, you told them this? What does it mean? And they told us, give us some examples. Well, when we moved this application to the cloud, it used to be in this secure environment that is not exposed to the internet, and now it's going to go out there. Okay, tell me more. What are you really worried about? Well, when the data gets from this point to this point, it could be intercepted, etc. Oh, great. Through what asset? Now, we came out with a list of 12 scenarios under the banner of the cloud. Okay? And every scenario needs to have an asset, a threat community, and an impact. Then it becomes a risk. Our tool forces you to follow those categories, otherwise it's not a risk. Okay? So scenario development, very key, very important. So, any question? Yes.
So risks are always changing.
Yes.
It's dynamic.
Yes.
How do you I guess, factor in all the changes that are happening, and some of which we might not, or none of us might know?
Yes.
How would you factor all that into the assessment?
It's a very good question. By the way, there's a couple questions in there. First one is like, you cannot estimate scenarios you don't know about, okay? I mean, it's not magic. It is what it is, okay? But you can estimate things by using extrapolations and ranges of possible things could happen. Today, what our customers do, they iterate analysis and say, based on the new threat intelligence we have this quarter versus last quarter, based on the improved tools we put in our systems, what changed, and rerun the analysis based on new intelligence. But it's not real time. The gentleman asked the question before, how automated is it? We're working with some companies to build an automated input in a tool like this one, where threat intelligence tool will feed this model, and as threat actors and threat activity changes, these reports are changed dynamically. Okay, that's the future. Today it's non-real time. In the future it's going to be real time. Okay, so you need to iterate. It's not static once forever. Okay, and usually, by the way, when companies report on risk, unless you're in security operations, it's usually not every moment. It's every week, it's every month, it's every quarter. Sometimes, once a year to the board. It really depends on the company. Okay. Last question. Otherwise, bon appetit, have a good lunch, and hopefully this was informative and added value to your day. Thank you all very much.